everybody. Welcome to today's office hours. My name is Adrian Goins. I'm the Director of Community and Evangelism at Rancher Labs. It says so right there. I love that little thing. It reminds me who I am. We are here today to answer your questions about Rancher and Rancher solutions. And ideally, you can ask questions live if you want to join us in the Rancher users Slack. There's a channel there called Office Hours. So join. We've got people monitoring that, and well, yeah, we're here to talk. But before we dive in, let's do a round of introductions. I am joined today by two of my colleagues. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves? Jason, you're up first.
Sure thing. All right. So Jason Van Breckel, also known as JVB. I work with Rancher Federal on the Platform One project, and that's me in a nutshell.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. My name is Murali Paluru, and folks know me by my GitHub handle leo.cloud. I'm a principal software engineer at Rancher. I've been with Rancher for almost 4+ years now. Looking forward to speaking with you today.
Fantastic. Welcome, both of you. I would be so overwhelmed if I didn't have you here helping me out. But this is a public event, and no public event would be complete without some ground rules. Dum, dum, dum. So, please, this is a safe place that exists to help members of the community grow from the experience of others. So everyone is welcome, and we expect everyone to treat each other with respect and dignity. That means that there are no stupid questions. But we do ask that you limit your questions to topics around how to use Rancher, how to use Kubernetes, and other CNCF tools. And then we're going to do our best to answer every single question, but we don't have access to your specific environment. So that means that we might not be able to do specific debugging of local issues, but we will absolutely do our best to get you to the next step in your troubleshooting. Panelists, Jason and Murali, please jump in and answer any question or anything that you can add information to from your own experience that will help whoever is asking the question. And then audience, you can help us out in the chat by pasting URLs to official documentation, blogs, tweets, anything else that might be relevant to the conversation if you also can help out. We take both live questions and prepared questions. So in between sessions, which means after today, please post your questions on the Rancher forums or on Stack Overflow tagged with either Rancher, K3S, RKE, or Longhorn, or whatever else you're asking a question about, I suppose. But those are the tags that I look for when I'm collecting questions. And then you can also help us out by following Rancher Labs on Twitter and retweeting the announcements for upcoming sessions. The more people that we have here, the better it is for everyone. All of us bring our own experiences to the table, and it's important that we share those so that we all grow together. If you would like to be one of our panelists in a future session, you can reach out to me on the Rancher user Slack. I'm simply Adrian, and you can let me know. And if you're new to Kubernetes or Rancher, we have a weekly Intro to Kubernetes and Rancher training that will help get you up and running. And then for comprehensive training on Rancher and using it to deploy and manage Kubernetes clusters, you can also check out the Rancher Academy. And I'll have more information about that at the end. Let's see. Do we have announcements today? Let me flip to my other document here. I'm sitting here with so many monitors open.
Hey, Adrian, I've got a report on the chat that your sound is low, but the other members are okay. The fact that we're loud.
Oh.
I mean, I know I'm loud. I have to yell at my kids, but
no, that's good. That's good. Hang on. Let me adjust the gain on my audio. 1 second. I had a problem in an earlier chat where I was completely blown out, so I wanted to be careful not to. Here's the part where my poor little computer is just, no, I'm not going to respond. All right. Tell us in the chat if that's better, and if not, I'll just continue to turn my volume up until it is. Now I lost my announcements page.
all right. I got better from the chat.
Better from the chat. Thank you, chat. All right, so announcements. I have announcements at the beginning and announcements at the end. And actually, let's just do these because if you have to drop off before the end of this, it's important that you know that there's some other cool stuff happening today. For example, this afternoon, we have the Rancher and Azure Arc meetup. So this is happening just prior to the US office hours session. If you attend this, you can flow right over into the US office hour session, and hopefully we'll get some people to join. We can continue the conversation. Also, tomorrow, there is a meetup in EMEA, and this is with Palo Alto Networks talking about Prisma, and you'll have Sheldon, who's one of the Rancher field engineers there. So if that's of interest to you, you can join both of those, and then, of course, you can just keep track of the meetups that we have going on at rancher.com/online meetups. So let's jump over to Slack and see what there is to be seen. I'm in the wrong channel. You can jump over Slack. You can watch me talk to Sam. All right. So do we have anybody who's asking questions yet? And if not, we'll take some of the prepared questions that we've got.
No questions yet.
No questions yet. All right, so remember, if you're watching the stream live, you can join the Office Hours channel on the Rancher user Slack. If you don't join and you don't ask questions, then we're just going to talk about whatever we want to talk about. What do we have for prepared questions? Prepared questions are always a challenge. Like, nobody wants to write a... Hey, look at that. We got Jason up. Let's see if we can get me up as well. Hey, cool. Nobody wants to write a question and have it answered a month later. So, I go through that and I try to find questions that have been out there that haven't been answered, and I try to pick more recent ones. But really, like, if you've asked a question on Stack Overflow or in the forums or anything like that, if you want to just bring it to my attention, that's also cool. You can find me on the user Slack and say, hey, I asked a question over here. I know office hours is coming up in a few days. Can you answer it? And the reason that I like prepared questions is it allows us to take the answers that we put here and write them back into the forum or the post on Stack Overflow, and then that becomes not like a community wiki, but like a source of documentation for other people who have those questions in the future. I don't like when I go to Stack Overflow and I find a question that was asked 2 years ago that has no answers. I'm like, somebody has an answer.
Okay, so we got a couple in the chat. I like this. How do we feel about the announcement of SUSE and Rancher? I think that's a great one.
I think it's a great announcement. I really liked the language that was used, the specific words that they chose. We obviously can't talk in great detail about what's going on between SUSE and Rancher other than the information that's already public. I can tell you personally, I am extremely excited by the opportunities that this opens up for Rancher.
Yeah, and I'll certainly echo that. If those who have read through all the articles, it will include the Rancher Labs team proper and the Rancher Federal team as well. And so we're all of us over at Federal are also really excited. One, to be, some of us came from labs like myself, others joined Federal directly. So it'll be cool kind of to have everybody back in the same family. And then, just the things that we could do as a result of this, of this happening. Yeah, that's really exciting to me. I'm pumped.
Nice. Murali, do you have any thoughts on it?
I'm really excited about this whole SUSE plus Rancher acquisition. I mean, what I feel like, what everybody feels is like this is going to benefit both the companies, and we are going to help more. We'll help develop more projects and help the community more, the open source community.
Yeah.
So looking forward for this.
We ourselves don't have a lot of information. We know basically as much as you guys do since the announcement was made. I just, every time I sit back and I think about what the future could hold, if when all of this comes together, and there's still a chance that it'll never happen just because of regulation and approval and all of that stuff that the lawyers deal with. But if it all goes through, there's no scenario I can imagine in the future that isn't just awesome for everybody involved. Awesome for SUSE, awesome for Rancher, awesome for everybody who uses products from either of the companies. There have been posts about concerns that people have. And when you read those things, just remember that nobody knows. Like, we can all think the worst about anything, and some of us are predisposed to do so. I personally prefer to think the best about everything, because those are the outcomes that I want to put energy into and that I want to bring about. So I think it's just going to be absolutely amazing. All right, I see we've got other questions. Is Rancher OS really dead? That's an interesting question. The answer is no. Rancher OS is still out there. We still have customers who are using it, who have it as part of their enterprise subscription, and as long as there are people who are using it, it will continue to be supported. As far as whether it's under active development for anything other than maintenance type stuff, I don't know. It comes up periodically in the conversations that I am part of, and remember, I'm in community, I'm not a developer. So I can't tell you what the future holds for it, but I can tell you that we still have customers who have it supported, and therefore, it's still a real thing. If you're looking to deploy Rancher OS, though, I don't know. Trying to think of what to say there. If you're just starting out and you want to explore container-based operating systems, the main thing about Rancher OS is that it runs everything as a Docker container. It's a container-based operating system that just is based off of Docker. At the time that it came out, Docker was the thing. It was all that there was. But now there's Cryo, there's Containerd, there was Rocket for a while. There are other solutions out there. And so an operating system that's based entirely on Docker has a limited number of places where it can be relevant. So if you're looking to deploy something that's container-based, I would look at the other options that are out there. Rancher is building K3OS, which is certainly still super alpha, but has a lot of really cool stuff in it for managing the operating system from within Kubernetes. And then there are other solutions out there. In fact, there are solutions from SUSE. There are solutions from Red Hat. There are other container-based platforms out there. And look for things that are leaning towards immutable infrastructure. Immutable infrastructure means that you deploy the operating system, but you don't SSH into it and do patches. You don't go in and make changes on the OS. Look for things where you can manage the OS as a super commodity, as just a foundational component of Kubernetes itself. And you'll find that there are a myriad of options out there that are worth exploring. Let's see. Oh, okay, this is interesting. We here on this Office Hours live stream, we don't know everything, contrary to popular belief. So I like questions that are interesting. So what do we got here? Using K3S, want to switch to Nginx to Cert Manager for more fluid experience. I'm using Rancher for a couple of years, and I love the software. Document HTTPS with the built-in traffic on K3S.
Yeah, so it's a cool question. Something I think it needs a deep dive, just because I get doing that with Nginx. It's actually really simple.
Yeah.
I've been tripping over traffic quite a bit because I just don't know it that well. But I'd be curious to take what's in the docs for RKE around Cert Manager, or in Rancher around Cert Manager and Let's Encrypt it, just try to apply that to traffic and see how it behaves, and then document the experience.
The thing about traffic is the thing about traffic. There are many things about traffic. First of all, K3S currently uses traffic 1.7, and traffic themselves have released a version 2. So when you're looking for documentation, most of the documentation that will come up immediately is actually for traffic version 2. In traffic 1.7, there are a smaller subset of features because whatever, it was designed to do what it was designed to do at the time. But it did include TLS certificates through Let's Encrypt. That was actually baked into it. So as far as how to do a certificate for traffic in 1.7, the documentation is there. Just make sure you don't stumble into the 2.x docs. However, if you are deploying K3S in a place where you actually have some resources available, you may consider deploying it without service LB and without traffic, or maybe just, I mean, depending on your environment, you can still keep service LB, and then manually deploy traffic 2.x. There's no reason to not use it unless you have, you know, a very small amount of RAM and CPU power available. It's a little bit heavier than traffic 1.7. And then you open the doors to lots of other available options, you know, that traffic can do. As far as how to create and use TLS certificates with K3S and traffic, I think it's just it's whatever traffic can do. There's nothing special about K3S other than making sure that you're looking at the correct documentation for traffic.
The question about Longhorn performance, I can actually address that a little bit. I help out with those meetings, make sure they get online. And specifically about performance of Longhorn. So the Longhorn project right now is very, very focused upon stability and making sure that your data stays safe and doesn't just disappear into the ether. So those are the kind of the key focuses of the team that's working Longhorn right now. Once that is in a really good place where they feel confident about it, performance is the next thing to come in. So, you know, we're well aware that we're not that the Longhorn project is not the fastest way of doing persistent storage in Kubernetes yet, and that is coming. That being said, it is production ready. It is GA'd. But it's definitely the engineering team has prioritized stability over speed. And then they're going to come in and kind of backfill in the roadmap as far as enhancing the its speed versus its competition. So great question out there.
I used to describe storage as the holy grail of container solutions. It's such an important part, and it's challenging. It's simple. Like you're like, oh, it's storage. It's so important to get it right, because if you get it wrong, it creates so many other cascading issues. There are a range of solutions out there. There's Portworx, there's OpenEBS, there's StorageOS, there's Ceph and Gluster, and then you've got the Rook project, which allows you to run all of those inside of containers. Again, so I always look at things from the resource perspective. What do you have available? People ask about Rook and Ceph a lot, and I've used Rook with Ceph, and I loved it, but then I found that I needed dedicated infrastructure for it. I needed to have 3 machines with lots of RAM, lots of CPU, and lots of disks so that I could build this storage cluster. And if I'm going to do that, what's the benefit of running it inside of Kubernetes? If I have to, it's just Kubernetes becomes another layer of thing that I have to manage on top of it. If you have infrastructure you can dedicate, then consider that you might get better performance from an external solution like Gluster or Ceph just on the infrastructure itself, outside of Kubernetes. Rancher tries to keep... Go ahead, Jason.
I love this response. The problem is very difficult to find the right one out there today. So many possible solutions. That's I think one of the hardest parts about the CNCF landscape and the distributed computing landscape right now is there's not always a best practice or a right solution. It's the right solution for your situation right now based on the available choices. And I tell the joke, there's no such thing as a full stack full stack distributed systems developer, because if you go to the landscape.cncf.io page, there's like 3,000 technologies there.
It's terrifying.
I fielded a question yesterday where somebody asked, what do I do about storage in my cluster when I have both Windows and Linux nodes? I'm like, well, you're going to run some of your storage for Windows and some of your storage for Linux, because there is no unified solution that just works really well.
I see one question from...
Go
I'm
ahead,
with
Murali.
Adrian. It's about using Rancher in private networks. So I just wanted to add some information about that.
Okay.
Amit, we have a whole section dedicated in our docs for the private VPC. It's called air gap setups. So we have a whole section dedicated in our docs, like how you go about setting up your private registry. How do you clone the GitHub repositories that are needed? Um, for Rancher to function properly. So all of it is documented. So and our
We lost Murali. Jason, are you still there? Oh no. Am I still here?
like totally locked down. So we do have customers using Rancher in private VPCs. So I'm not really sure what problem you faced, but Rancher does support air gap setup.
We lost Zoom there for a few seconds, but you came back. I'm actually looking for the docs right now about air gap. Somebody asked me about air gap the other day, and it's something that I haven't actually set up. But Murali, have you set up an air gap environment before?
Is safe. So we helped with the whole setup of Rancher, setting up their private registry. So the private registry was using Artifactory. So we mirrored all the images and started Rancher, and we have done a POC on-prem, as well as we have done a POC on Amazon in a private VPC, and also added to that complexity, they had a proxy setup as well. In case there are certain applications which need access to go out to the internet. So we did all of these things recently, and obviously because the POC was successful, we were able to convert them to as a customer. So yeah, so it does work, Adrian. Although I
Nice.
didn't set it up myself, but I
Right.
pretty much helped the customer right from the beginning.
Nice. We have a lot of customers I know who use it. We have customers in government and finance and super high secure environments.
Yeah.
And air gap is a very, very popular way to deploy not just Kubernetes itself, but I mean, it begs the question, how do you have a management solution in an environment that's disconnected from everything? And that's always been one of the core features that Rancher has built into it. There is...
We might have lost the stream.
Oh, really?
Let's see. So yeah, we were talking about picking the right solution, and I see that come up. I get that question all the time, both from the community, from our clients, and even from our consultants who who've not been buried in Kubernetes for 5 years, like I have. And yeah, it's the. I think I spend most of my time in this space just doing research. So. Just because there are so many options out there. Adrian, I saw you put up the landscape or the landscape CNCF page. That's just the breadth of what's out there. I think it just in Kubernetes distributions alone, between open source and proprietary. You've got kubeadm, you've got Rancher, you've got Convoy. There's a lot of stuff coming out. There's actually multiple solutions from VMware. You've got OpenShift with Red Hat, which is Kubernetes wrapped in their essentially paths. Just picking a Kubernetes distribution can be a significant undertaking to figure out what's best for you. It's nice to have the CNCF for governance and for defining what is a certified Kubernetes distribution. So yeah, the storage question, I still 2 or 3 years ago, the question would be, what should I use for persistent storage? My answer is always, well, don't bother right now. It's better to have it separate. It's still a pain in the butt. That's no longer my answer. My answer is now, it's even worse. It's just, it depends. Yeah, it's going to depend on your needs. It's going to depend on your project. And it's going to depend whether you have just Linux or Linux and Windows, or Linux and Windows and everything, ARM along with Linux and Windows. So it's fun. It's fun. I think it's the best way to put it. I spend so much time reading the docs, and I joke that my job as a solutions architect is to read the docs so you don't have to.
I read somewhere that we never really get rid of our problems. We simply trade them for different ones, and that the objective in life is to come up with the best set of problems you could possibly have and then just manage those effectively. Every time I encounter a problem with Kubernetes, with a cluster, with the stuff at my house, while it's frustrating for sure, the opportunity to overcome those challenges is it's so rewarding. And I feel that we're truly blessed to live in an age where we have the entire universe within a web browser, so we can find the documentation, and so we can rapidly gain new knowledge and try new things and decide what works and what doesn't. And anytime anybody comes and says, what's the right solution? Like Jason said, it completely depends on the circumstances and the parameters for your environment. And the best possible thing that you can do is just figure it out. Just deploy something. Don't immediately put all of your production stuff on it, but poke at it for a while and turn it around and see what happens. And don't be afraid to say, well, this totally doesn't work, and move on to something else. So I think when the stream crashed, I was talking about Rancher's overarching goal of making things simple. It's easy to make things complicated. It's easy to make things complex. It's easy to make things hard to do. But the real challenge comes from taking a complex thing like Kubernetes or like storage and making that simple and consumable. And maybe you don't get 100% of the features, but the top features that you might not have are actually niche features that most people don't use. Most people need the bulk of things, and that's what we're trying to deliver. So Longhorn is a great solution, and Longhorn is still in active development, and Longhorn will continue to get better. We will never feel that anything we have released is perfect, because once we've arrived, well, we might as well just all give up. We can always do better. Every single one of us can do better, and every single day Rancher is trying to do better for you with everything.
So I had a great question come in the chat about support for GCP, and they use the actual graphic of the various node drivers that are supported by Rancher.
This has come up a lot recently,
and this comes up every couple of months about GCP nodes being supported by the Rancher UI and by the Rancher software. You can actually do that today if you grab the GCP node driver and add it manually. I've not done that in a while. And to be 100% honest, just having worked with both GCP and GKE and the various cloud providers, there really is no better way to run Kubernetes on Google's cloud than GKE. Now, if you want to run RKE on GCP, that's one thing. But having spent a lot of time in the Google Cloud Platform on demos, working with Google on some things when I was with Rancher Labs, unless you have a very specific need to have the control that RKE offers you over what GKE offers you, my personal preference is when I'm running on Google's platform, I'm running GKE.
Yeah, the hosted Kubernetes solutions and Rancher's support for them is, honestly, you don't want to manage a control plane. It's great when it works. It's just one of those problems that you don't want to have when it doesn't work.
Yeah, I have no desire to run my own control plane. It's kind of like things like LDAP and Active Directory. Doing Kubernetes back before I joined Rancher Labs, I was doing a lot of decks and trying to wire all that together and trying to manage a whole bunch of roles and all of that, almost manual. You can lose your mind. I shed a tear of joy when I joined Rancher Labs and we were about to release 2.0, and the feature that automatically integrate it with LDAP and AD and ADFS and Keycloak. The fact that that just works and I don't have to configure it and I don't have to manage it, I don't have something else to babysit, like you mentioned Rook and Ceph earlier, like that's worth its weight in gold. That time I save not having to manage that because it's managed by the robot is all the better.
That's time you can spend on something else. Morley, do you have any strong feelings about storage or Kubernetes control planes?
Nothing on storage. Storage is not my strongest area, so I don't have any comments there. Control plane, yes, I do have one comment there. So I mean, a lot of users are really excited about AKS and ZKE and all the managed services. I mean, I'm not against them. I mean, the only thing that I do not like about the managed services is I don't have any control or visibility of the master node. And, I can't take snapshots of the etcd. I can't do anything with the underlying etcd storage. And that kind of bothers me. Other than that, no, I mean, they work great, and obviously Rancher supports them. If I personally have to do it, I would like create it from scratch, like in a sense, like create a cluster either using the node drivers or a custom cluster, and I would use that so that I have more control over my cluster.
Do you think that having that level of control over a cluster is something that people should start out with, or if somebody's just getting into Kubernetes, should they stick with a hosted cloud provider or something that's managed and learn about Kubernetes before getting into learning about the idiosyncrasies of etcd and schedulers and APIs and stuff like that?
I mean, if you're starting out to learn Kubernetes, I personally feel that you should set up your own Kubernetes cluster once. Like there's like this famous GitHub repository, learn Kubernetes the hard way. That's like extremely hard. I wouldn't suggest that for a beginner, but at least use a tool like RKE or KDM. Just start it out, see the logs, get a feel for, these are the different components of a Kubernetes cluster. And once you are familiar with Kubernetes and comfortable with it, and then you are trying to bring your business applications onto a Kubernetes cluster, then you would realize maybe your business use case kind of aligns with I need more control. There's no way I can run Kubernetes in the cloud. I have to run it on-prem on bare metal or in my private data center. Then obviously, the business choice is to run your own cluster. But on the other hand, let's say if you're like a small shop and then you don't have too many people in your team who can manage a Kubernetes cluster, and you just want something that works, and then I don't want to have the headache of managing a cluster, maybe then these managed Kubernetes clusters make sense. Does that sound reasonable to you, Adrian? What do you think?
Oh, it sounds completely reasonable. It actually comes back to the "it depends" argument from earlier. There is absolutely value in understanding the thing that you're using well enough that you could fix it if it broke, so that then you can choose to not fix it. It's like understanding how your car works. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to fix it, but it's important that you can at least identify what a problem is, and then you take it to a mechanic. On the other hand, I know nothing about how my car works. And it's also worth pointing out that some people have data center environments or bare metal infrastructure or VMware infrastructure where a hosted provider would just be an extra expense that would take it outside of the infrastructure that they already have. In which case, learning and deploying and using Kubernetes on the infrastructure that you have is super valuable. Like I have a lab here in my house, and I also have a DigitalOcean cluster. And most of the stuff that I do, I actually prefer to do on the infrastructure here at home. I agree with you that it's frustrating to not be able to run backups of etcd or not be able to see any of that and have to just trust in a provider that I know is using the economies of scale to try and make everything the same, and I may not get the level of attention. But then there's also value in what Jason said of not having to spend the time doing or managing that, and instead can spend that time somewhere else. So I don't know. I feel like I can go both ways. What do we have going on in the chat?
So we have a question about the Rancher UI, and I think this is a good question because we kind of talk about where things are going with the new UI.
Okay.
Yes, the new dashboard is missing some things. It's in very, very active development. But I could talk a little bit about the roadmap, and I won't speak for Rancher Labs product team and their roadmap, but I do know what I'm hearing out of them is that a lot of the development that's going into the new UI is because we're also developing a new API. And the goal of that API is increased ability for automation beyond what the current API can do, as well as support for Kubernetes cluster API. So for a very long time, Rancher has been able to provision nodes and create clusters, via with the Docker node drivers and through Container Engine, which is our own open source project. These overlap and kind of supersede functionality that's currently available by the cluster API part of Kubernetes. But cluster API is becoming more mature. It will be eventually a thing that I don't avoid because it will be the way that things get deployed. And essentially, the plan is so that as cluster API moves into maturity and production usability, Rancher will come alongside and also support that, as well as all the other things that we've built over the years to make provisioning Kubernetes easier.
Nice answer.
But I always push the caveat there. I never speak for roadmap or engineering team.
No.
Bill and Denise would hurt me if I did that.
Yeah, Rancher is all of the stuff that we do is continuously evolving. It's continuously evolving. Like there's no, well, like I said earlier, we never arrive at the destination, and we want to build the features that are important and the features that are most impactful. And we're also not afraid to make mistakes, and we're not afraid to remove things that aren't working, and we're not afraid to put stuff out there. Like we could build the perfect UI in the dark and never show it to anybody until we're like, ta-da, and then everybody could hate it because it doesn't do what they want it to do. So it's far better for us to put things out there and say, hey, use this, and tell us what's good, and tell us what's not good, because it's open source software. We build it for you. And so it's, if there are things that you want, if there are things that you want to see, go look for GitHub issues that are asking for those features and add your support to those issues. Or if you don't find an issue, open an issue and request a feature. All of that stuff is considered by the roadmap team. If nobody asks for anything, we don't know that people want it built. And it's entirely possible that the feature you're requesting is something that lots of other people would like to see as well. And then you can promote your issue and get other people to add their support for it. You might just find that, cornflower blue is the next color of the Rancher UI if you just, if you can get enough people to say yes.
We used to joke continuously at the last place I worked. I used to work for Apprenda, which was also in this CNC of Kubernetes space, and we used to joke about everything being Apprenda blue, and it was sort of cornflower-ish, a little bit darker.
Nice.
So, Adrian, there was one question early on in the chat. It's about like, hey, any bad stories worth to share in terms of Rancher or Kubernetes cluster? Failure is learning. So, I have one recent experience with one of our working with one of our customers. So,
okay.
this customer, raised a support ticket, and it was like, hey, we are having issues with this WebSocket connections. We are constantly seeing errors. The agents are like kind of having trouble connecting to Rancher. The cluster goes unavailable state and goes into unavailable state, and kind of some weird issues. So after like spending some time debugging this whole thing, what we realized was there were like a bunch of secrets which were more than 1 MB. And, etcd is kind of designed or not just secret, I think it's like a config map. So one of those objects was more than 1 MB. I think etcd's limit to store a particular object is 1 MB. So if we were able to identify that, and once we got that object removed from the cluster, things were back up and running again. So that's one example that's on top of my head, from my recent calls. Do you guys have any more stories to tell?
I do.
I break stuff all the time.
My
I know, right?
So my most recent YouTube video was about the upgrade that I started doing here in my house, where I have an old, listen to me, it was like a year and a half old, RKE installation on 4 Proxmox VMs, and I'm running Rancher 2. And at the time that I built it, I didn't have a lot of infrastructure in my house, so I went ahead and deployed Rancher, and then I deployed workloads in the Rancher server cluster, which is a big no-no. You're not supposed to do that. But whatever, I didn't get struck down by lightning, so I did it anyway. And now I have more infrastructure, so it's not really easy to separate those, and I decided I would just build a whole new Rancher server and a whole new cluster, and I would migrate workloads over. And I started filming it, and so the first video is about me launching Rancher, launching a K3S cluster, and then deploying Vault with it, because I use that for short-time AWS dynamic keys when I'm doing my demos. And I chose to go with the BQ Lite implementation of HA for K3S. So the first lesson here is read the docs and read the issues. Because while the docs still say that, well, certainly it's experimental, but I was like, whatever, how experimental can it be? It's pretty experimental. But had I looked at the issues, I would have discovered that a month earlier, Darren decided that we were no longer going to use DQ Lite because it has stability issues. And instead, we're going to do an embedded etcd. So I was left with a K3S cluster that I'd built using a technology that was no longer going to be supported by Rancher, and no real way to get out of that other than to build it again. But I'd already filmed all of this video content about building it. And fortunately for me, 2 days after the first video, it totally imploded. There's a freak DQ Lite K3S error that has open issues and nobody has a solution for it, where DQ Lite is apparently not actually really HA. There's some condition where even though it's supposed to be multi-master, it isn't. And if the master node is rebooted or if K3S is restarted, it never comes back up. It seg faults, and you can't ever start the cluster again. So I've spent the last month trying to figure out how I can do like a dump of it and load it into SQLite, and just it's done. I got to just nuke the whole thing. So the lesson there is read the issues, read the docs, and if something says it's experimental, it's probably experimental.
How experimental can it be? I love that. I spent so much time playing with the Windows side of Kubernetes. I in a past life, I was a .NET developer for 10, 15 years in that space, going back from like VB3 all the way to .NET Core. So I've got, Windows is near and dear to my heart in a way that a lot of Kubernetes and Linux people just find absolutely disgusting. And I don't blame them. But because of that, I always have to caveat when I'm working with clients or the community around Windows. It's okay. Consider everything that you're doing here. Although the docs say it's production ready, it's still a bit mushy around the edges, and it's not experimental because it is GA production code. But it's not been bashed with a sledgehammer enough by the community and by production users to find all the fun parts. All those the thing like the seg fault with DQ Lite, where we all know it's a problem, we just don't know how to fix it.
Yep.
So, good question. Any plans to have full Istio as part of the default installation, like a K3s plus full Istio? I could, again, not speaking for engineering, we're very much, being opinionated when it's appropriate to be opinionated. And Istio has done a lot of really good things recently to make it a bit simpler architecturally than it was, like, even a year ago. Linkerd has also done a lot of really cool things. So I don't know if we're going to have like a K3s Istio bundle, but I know that Istio is going to be important to all of us in this space to do service mesh because it does it really well. That being said, what Google has done with Istio recently is creating its own software foundation specific to just managing the trademarks of Istio. I don't know what that's going to do to the community, to enterprises moving to support Istio. It's left a sour taste in a lot of people in the space's mouth. I don't really have a strong opinion on that either way because I've not dug into it deeply. But that may or may not affect different vendors' ability to integrate with Istio, because now there's this other party involved with the trademarks of Istio that now control how those trademarks are being used. And a lot of CNC, a lot of things like CNCF and Linux Foundation, a lot of those things are about guiding code and guiding architecture and guiding project. They also, it's also a place where all the trademarks are held so that everybody can use them and enjoy them. This muddies the water a bit for Istio as far as trademarks are concerned, because when you're dealing with trademarks and copyrights and licenses, you're dealing with things that lawyers have to get involved in, and it can get really, really, really icky really fast. I did a project back in my college days forever ago on the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Those of us in the United States, the DMCA is supposed to protect copyrights of users against people just throwing your stuff online. There were other laws around copyright that didn't get passed by Congress that would have basically reversed what's called the Betamax decision. So Betamax is what allows us to basically create copies of software. Like you can have a floppy disk, back 15, 20 years ago, of a piece of software you already owned because of the Betamax decision. So anything around trademark and copyright and licensing with these software projects, it can get really hairy. Because lawyers can get involved, and when lawyers get involved, things just grind to a halt, and it actually can affect our ability to innovate because somebody else just controls the trademark.
Yeah, that whole side of it's like the dark side of what we do.
That's like really a great way of describing it. I think organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation are really, really important because they act as a watchdog on all of these really big companies building awesome things that occasionally just want to do something that's not quite above board, or is not in the best interest of the community. It might be in their financial best interest, but they're out there making sure that government is behaving and making sure that Facebook, Google, are all
Apple,
behaving as well. Because I mean, like it or not, Facebook, Google, Amazon are all the size of small governments and small countries, and some of them even bigger countries. I mean, Amazon's market cap is ridiculous. That's not a moral judgment. It's just the amount of power they wield because of the amount of money they have. It makes it makes this stuff. It's not always for me. I just want to solve the problem the quickest, easiest way possible, and make people's eyes light up and make them smile and solve the problem. But there's all these other things like now I'm working on a project where we're melding a whole bunch of really cool open source stuff. But like right now, for example, I'm trying to do something with TOTP. This is a time-based way of doing two-factor authentication, like your Google Authenticator app and your Microsoft Authenticator apps all run on TOTP. So now looking at open source software to bring into this project for TOTP, but part of my process is I have to scan that base with a license check just to make sure that I don't have any GPL in there that would, quote unquote, infect my code base. So it all have to be GPL. Or,
Right.
I have to check, I have to actually read the license if it's not a license that's normal. Like I found one yesterday. It's a great piece of software, but it's got a copyright notice on it, but no license. So it's not Apache 2. It's not public domain. I can't touch it because it's it's one of those areas where, great solution, will absolutely solve my problem, but because it's not licensed under a compatible license for the project one, I can't touch it.
I don't want to think about any of that stuff. I just want to build code, and write stuff, and make things, and turn them loose upon the world. But you're absolutely right. These are all things that especially when you're working in a business or government or on a project where you're like, these things matter. I had a thought when you said Amazon. Oh, I might have actually said this in the last live stream. I don't remember. I read a book a bunch of years ago called Jennifer Government, and it took place in the future. And people took the last name of the company that they worked for. So, like, I would be Adrian Rancher, and you would be Jason Rancher. And if you worked for the government, then government became your last name. So there was a woman who was the protagonist whose name was Jennifer Government. And I thought that was really funny that they just described, the governments of the world just became corporations, and then competed with corporations the same as anything else. It's an interesting book.
Have you read Snow Crash?
Oh, of course I've read Snow Crash.
I figured you've read Snow Crash. That's got a similar take to it around corporatism and technology.
Yeah. I was a big Neil Stephenson fan up through Cryptonomicon, and then when he started writing these like mega tomes and going off on like, I couldn't keep up. All right, we are almost out of time, but Siam has a question that I want to hit here as probably the last question. He says, what's the plan to manage and deploy apps to fleets of clusters? I know Fleet is another project, but I believe like if I have 20 clusters to be managed and I want to enforce policies or GitOps across all clusters managed by Rancher, I should be able to via Rancher. I like the word should. Should is a dangerous word. Fleet is a separate project, but it is a core component of our vision for the future. So I can't say, again, Jason and I have both said we don't talk roadmap and engineering and stuff. I can't say when and I can't say how, but I can say that Fleet is important. And when looking at how Rancher will manage thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Kubernetes clusters, up to 1 million clusters, Fleet's going to be a big part of that story. I can also tell you that there is work being done on Rancher 2.5 that will incorporate, will have a story for GitOps. I haven't seen it yet, and I don't know what it is, but GitOps is a super cool, super important part of immutability, source of truth, repeatable, and infrastructure as code type stuff for Kubernetes, and we want to make sure that we have that available in the product for people to use. Right now, you can still do GitOps stuff with the Kubernetes clusters directly, but you can just go into Rancher and change stuff manually, and that kind of violates the whole GitOps property. So look for that coming in Rancher 2.5. And RKE2. RKE2 is going to be amazing. Lots of really good security stuff in there. In fact, Jason, do you know anything about that from the security perspective, or even Murali?
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, big part of Rancher Fed, we're very involved in helping guide some of the decisions around RKE2. We're looking to have FIPS compliant cryptographic libraries as part of RKE to have an open source FIPS compliant option for Kubernetes, because right now everything else that's out there that is FIPS compliant is either closed sourced or protected by a commercial support agreement like Docker E, for example. Like if you want FIPS compliant Docker Community Edition, although I believe it's all the same code base, if you want the FIPS compliant, you got to pay the big licensing fee for it. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about working on Fed projects, is say, here, open source, CNCF certified distribution with FIPS compliant cryptographic modules. Actually, one of the things I'm working on for Fed right now is I'm developing a set of videos called "What the Federal," because there's all these different acronyms and components of government that the private sector just doesn't handle or doesn't deal with on a day-to-day basis, or that there's some overlap in financial infosec and federal infosec. So I'm going to be doing a series of videos where I take something like FIPS. What is FIPS? Describe what FIPS is. How does FIPS work? What does a FIPS compliant piece of software mean? Like I'm going to do that with FIPS and STIG and DSOP and all these different well-known public acronyms, both in the military, government, financial space, but that developers and technologists, they come in and they get hit not just by their Kubernetes alphabet soup, but now by a whole set of regulatory alphabet soup. And what does that mean to the technologist? What does it mean for your software? What does it mean for your business?
My favorite acronym is TLA, which stands for three-letter acronym. A little bit of dorky recursive humor for you. Okay, we are out of time. So in closing, I just want to let you guys know that if you want to know more about Rancher, we have the Rancher Academy. This is a free certification course where you can learn about Rancher and how to use Rancher to deploy and manage Kubernetes clusters. So this is great. It's 5 weeks. Well, it's as long as you want it to be. There's no time limit. But if you spend 3 to 5 hours a week on it, it'll take you 5 weeks to complete it. And also, I want to tell you that coming up next week, Jason is rebooting the Ranchcast. And he's starting out with, yay! So you can get to this from youtube.com/c/theranchcast, or just search for Ranchcast. And he's starting out with a new series on using K3D. The Ranchcast is Jason, you're here. You tell us what the Ranchcast is.
Yeah. So the Registry is a developer-focused look at open source software, distributed systems, Rancher, and Kubernetes. So because of my background as a software developer, I tend to look at Kubernetes through the software developer lens, which, in short, the user experience for developers in the Kubernetes world just sucks right now. So anything I do to make that easier for developers who are building projects that are going to end up on Kubernetes, that's kind of the goal of the Ranchcast. So project we're working on recently, I got really into K3D because it's essentially a development-ready K3S in a second. So I'm like integrating that into all my loops. That's about what I'll be talking about next week on the Ranchcast.
Very cool. Oh, look at that. I put you on the screen. I meant to put me on the screen. There we go. Now it's me on the screen. I pressed the button and I'm like, wait a minute. That's not me. All right, that's all for today, folks. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'll make some changes for next week where I think I'll actually, instead of streaming this to a scheduled stream, I'm just going to stream it to the default stream. And that way, if it disconnects and reconnects, it'll just reconnect to the same thing. And then we don't have to deal with my stupid internet provider being what they are. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for participating in the chat. I want to thank Jason and Murali both for helping me out today. This was fantastic. The Office Hours channel in Slack is always open, so you can feel free to hang out there and continue the conversation. We will be doing this every month, and I look forward to seeing all of you at the next one. So until then, stay safe, keep ranching.